Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. In this episode, we're talking with Erin Guinup and learning all about the Tacoma Refugee Choir. We talk about where the idea came from, how it became a choir, how it's evolved, and we talk about scary things like not using sheet music. Anyway, I'm really excited to get a chance to sit down and talk quickly with Erin, and there are some awesome things coming up. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at Perform International. Talk about refugee choirs and all the places that I want to go visit. PI is the place to go for that one. But I won't talk anymore because there's so many great things to learn about Erin Guinup and the Tacoma Refugee Choir. Today on the podcast, we are talking to one of my friends in the choir world, Erin Guinup. Hi, Erin.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to spend time chatting. I feel like this is the coolest way to get to know people who live on the opposite side of the country. Will you tell the listeners where you're coming from and who is Erin Guinup?
Yeah, so I'm in Tacoma, Washington, up in the northwest of the country. I love Tacoma. I've lived here for most of my adult life, and while here, I am the founder and executive and artistic director of Tacoma Refugee Choir, which is a really unique organization. It brings together refugees, immigrants, and friends who seek belonging and it's really been a magical 8.5 year experience of taking this idea from inception to now national and international performances.
Wow. Okay, I can't wait to unpack that further. But how did you end up in Tacoma and how did you end up the founding artistic executive director of a choir?
I came up to Tacoma for college. I'm originally a California girl and then went to University of Puget Sound, met my husband, and we've just stayed and set up our lives here in Tacoma. And it's a beautiful part of the country. Yes, it rains a lot, but it also we have such easy access to ocean and mountains, and people are just really friendly here in Tacoma. So I love that here. The Tacoma Refugee Choir started in 2016. I saw a lot of imagery about refugees and in Syria, especially, and felt like I wanted to do something. And I was leading a church choir and teaching voice lessons, doing a lot of musical theater and a lot of like, I love pedagogy. I'm kind of a pedagogy nerd, but I felt like I wanted to do something about refugees, and, then the idea came to me, rather than volunteer to teach English on the side, to use my strength, which is music, of course, and so I thought we'd do this little pilot project. We set up a 6-week project in partnership with a organization that serves refugees in our community. They didn't know who I was, they didn't pitch any it's not, I didn't really even know any refugees at the time, but we did this project, and at the end of the 6 weeks, we had become such a close-knit group in just 6 weeks, and 2 of the members kept texting me saying, "When are we gonna sing again? When are we gonna sing again?" And so then I was like, "Okay, well, I guess we'll keep this thing going," and that's how it was kind of this accidental organization, but now we've served over 800 members from 75 countries. This last year had 17 countries represented among our 45 members, and it's a really unique organization. Even just the pedagogy process, I can explain that, like, but it
Mm-hmm.
really become this beautiful group of people who love to sing together.
That's so cool. So it was like an accident. You just wanted to do something. So you
Mhm.
set it up as something short and then it became something bigger. So
Yeah.
did you have to go through the whole 501(c)(3) process? Do you have a board? How has the business side of this grown over the last 8.5 years?
Yeah, so the first year we just operated as this project in the community and but of course so we started in 20 spring of 2016 and then by January of 2017 up to that point I was pretty naive of the politics around the word refugee because I grew up in Southern California that had welcomed a lot of Vietnamese and Hmong refugees and I just thought that's something we do is help people who are who really literally have no place else to go. So when the politics of around refugees heated up um, in January 2017, all of a sudden this became personal. I was like, oh wow. And we found ourselves on the news a week later, and so all of a sudden I realized, okay, this is not just like a little choir like I thought I was starting. And so in the summer of 2017, my accountant was like, girl, you're gonna go broke if you don't set up a 501(c)(3). So we set it up, called friends up, we set up a board, but I really had no experience in setting up like really understanding how to do this work. I hadn't worked in nonprofit before, so it's been a real baptism by fire of learning what are the integral elements of a successful organization. And now I feel like I really understand that. And I have an MBA that I got
Mm.
last in arts innovation. So I feel like I really understand those structural pieces now. And I've grown so much in that space, but also artistically, we've had to make some really interesting choices to to really build that space.
Wow. Okay. I love how you just dove in and made something happen amidst all of those different things that could have been roadblocks, but you just kept pushing through. So let's talk a little bit about this pedagogy. You have these hundreds of refugees that have come through the program. Tell us about how you were teaching them and choosing your repertoire and programming.
Yeah, I think in the first 3 year well, the first year or so, I treated it like a community chorus, right? So we had sheet music that were on themes that I thought would be relevant, and we would get a lot of people come in, and they would say it was such a great day. They loved it, but they wouldn't necessarily come back after a couple of times. So we had a really high churn rate, and and so we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, they all are saying, "Oh, we loved it. It was great," but they're not coming back. So clearly we're not meeting a need. And so we spent a lot of time digging into what is the need that we can meet for them? Like, why aren't they coming back? What are we not providing? And what are the barriers for them to be able to fully participate? And I'm using them, but I wanna be clear, like, we try really hard not to other people in that, but when you're trying to look at problems, it's helpful to look at demographic groups. Um, so as we went through here, we realized that a lot of the population so a couple things about Tacoma. First of all, we're not a high refugee resettlement area. We actually are, the national average is 14.4% immigrant born, and Tacoma is 12.9. So we're actually below the national average. So which means this could be done basically in any community. But those who
Hmm.
find themselves in our community don't have ethnic enclaves. So what happens is they really are a lot of them are fairly alone besides their family in our community. So that's where the real opportunity is that there is an opportunity to provide that sense of belonging. But a lot of the countries from which our members originate are not coming from countries where sheet music is part of the musical tradition. And that was a difficult realization to make, to go, okay, I'm committed to this mission and I love the people we're meeting and I want to serve them. But the way that I have been taught my whole life how to make music is not relevant in these circumstances. And so I realized, like, was talking to a colleague and helped me realize that we had to give up sheet music, which was really, really painful. And then, and so what on earth do you teach? And I don't come from an oral tradition, so really learning how to teach in an oral tradition and trying to learn concepts from different traditions, whether it's gospel or some of the countries we're learning from, both about the harmonic structures that are going to work there. Because at first I was just like, okay, I'll teach the sheet music orally,
Mm.
but that doesn't necessarily pay tribute as well to the traditions that were in the space. So it really has been this very fascinating learning process about how to teach a style of music that is not native to me and be able to be open to hearing all the feedback in the room. So it became very much a decentered space where our choir members are bringing their own songs into the space, helping us learning to create harmony. And we would incorporate ideas on how to teach parallel harmonies and such, but once and how to improvise. But once they had some courage with that, they've really brought a lot of unique sounds to the space that I was not familiar with prior to doing this work. And then uh, entering into the songwriting space. And so now we've written well over 25 songs as as a choir community that speak to themes that have emerged from these conversations.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is so much to talk about. So you made the transition from sheet music and everything that you knew as a musician to teaching orally. Really lots of growth there. What how did it get into songwriting? Did it just like come out of an activity? And how have you now written so many songs as a choir? What does that process look like?
I mean, I haven't thought of where it quite originated from, but I think I remember distinctly one day we had someone come in and they just like they made up a song on the spot and I was like, "Oh, we can do that." We we don't we I don't have to be such a snob about where that text comes from and like refining the process. And since then, I've been able to work with people like Martha Gonzalez and Quetzal Flores of the band, Quetzal that teach a lot of communal songwriting workshops. We had them come in and then our, I some of these things have happened kind of accidentally. Um, like one, I was on a tour of refugee gardens in our community gardens, and one that was, oh, run by a Vietnamese community through the translator, I had said, "Oh, the space is so poetic. It's almost like a song." And the translator translated it as, "Oh, it's she wants to write a song about this experience." And I was like, "Well, I can do that." And so then we met together and I these elders shared their story for 2 hours and it was one of the most humbling, sacred kind of spaces to hear of their emotions through that process, and so then I sat in the garden, wrote a rough draft, came back to them, and then that's when I learned about more of the tonal pieces that were missing, and so they helped me correct the melody so that it would reflect the tonal characteristics of their language, um, and so it's a really unique song, and then we worked on it as the choir, then the choir helped develop the harmonies, and we went back again to the elders and said, "Do you approve this?" They recommended a couple of changes, yet again, and then we worked it into a performance.
Wow. And so you're able to not just use inspiration from the experiences, but also rely on those culture sharers that are sharing what they know to expand your knowledge. That is so cool.
Well, I agree. I think it's, like, one of my favorite parts of this experience is that, like, I think we think of culture shares there are some really incredible cultural shares in our field who are able to translate their culture to classical music. But I think it's a skill that we as choir directors can actually be more open to is trying to learn the language and then translating it through the music. The music is actually the translation tool, and, being able to say, "What do you think of this?" and being humble enough to say, "Oh, that's not gonna work. Like, you have to rewrite this whole section." They may not know necessarily what it should sound like. They gave a couple of ideas, but they're not professional musicians per se, but by working together, I think they felt like they owned a piece of that.
There's so much collaboration in what you're saying, but it's not just I showed up and I wanted a choir and we were going to read from sheet music. It sounds like it's constantly evolving. So
Yeah.
over the 8.5 years, what does it look like now when someone comes into refugee choir rehearsal?
Yeah, I think when someone comes in, we recognize because we now get so many performance requests that we needed to stabilize the membership a little bit more. So we're not taking members every week. We're taking members during certain times of the year. When they come in, it's really centered on belonging. That's absolutely the most fundamental thing that people have articulated that they need. They want to feel valued. And we have these principles of belonging that we've developed. You don't just invite people in, they have to see that their needs are going to be met right away. So when someone comes in, we're trying to identify how they can have something met in that moment, whether that's um, a friendship or just having laughter and a joyful moment to be able to share their story, which is an important to be able to make that space. And there's a thousand other reasons. Sometimes people come in with very real needs, and sometimes you, you can't worry about, you can't make be fully present to make music if you don't know if your house is secure. And so sometimes we'll be connecting people to those services. That's not our mission, and we definitely are very clear that that's not our piece, but we know people. So you do think you help your friends. And so that's a key piece. And then of this equation. But we spend more time than most choirs on check-ins.
Mm.
We provide space for people to check in with one another, share what they're going through, and to um, yeah, just to really connect with one another. And that's something that as the choir director part of my brain is often like, oh, these need to go faster, right? Because I want to get to the
Right.
music. But the human part of me also really loves that space. And I recognize that because of the time that we spend connecting and being and just being with one another, it makes the music making process go so much faster because now you're
Hmm.
not having to build trust. The trust is there, right? You know that it's in space, in place. So when I ask the choir to jump, they're gonna go all the way in because they know we have each other's back as human beings.
That is such a like a testament for the patience. Like you not only flipped your script and gave up what was your comfort zone, you've made space for what your singers, what your community needs, and then you're seeing that payback. This is so exciting. So let's talk for a second. What's the future of this organization look like?
Yeah, I think what's really amazing is I think is how it has evolved. Every year is a little bit different, and some of that is based on who is in the choir. So we're currently recruiting. We sing a lot of music from around the world, but it's the music that represents the members of the choir. So we can't even necessarily plan all the pieces for the fall because we don't know who's all going to be in that
Yay.
space yet.
Oh, I
So
love that.
there's a certain amount of, like we had a Rwandan member that has had to move and that means, oh darn, her songs, like how do we like is there anyone else who's going to be able to represent that cultural piece? I'm not sure there is. And so but hoping, that those pieces will be in space. But the choir has we've really worked also on leadership development and so that the choir members really own that space. And part of that has been by design because I've recognized after 8.5 years that I've really given my heart and soul into this space. And so I'm actually preparing to leave the organization for new adventures. And the choir itself, I think, will really. It's going to take ownership. The board hired a new artistic director in Orlando Morales. He's fabulous and really excited to see how the community really takes ownership of this space and takes it to the next level.
I think that's such a great place to be as a founding artistic executive director. We talk about this in the book Alex Gardner and I wrote. There's different phases of an organizational lifespan. And some of us are really good at birthing things. Like, I love starting an organization. And there's a point at which you can do that forever and continually change and develop. But there's something so magical about setting it up and taking it to your peak and passing it off to someone and watching them take it to their peak. I'm so excited for you and for them.
I am too. I think this is absolutely the right point where things are in place and now the community and new leadership can really uh, explore the new possibilities for this model.
And it's like you've planted these seeds. I talk about it all the time. No one can ever take away the experience of learning how to start a 501c3. No one can ever take away that experience of when you realize to let go of the sheet music. It's the experiences that make us the pedagogues and the educators and the humans that we are. It's it's a job in the main piece. It just involves a lot of our hearts and souls as well. So it's so interesting to see what you have grown and built, and it's so cool to hear how you did it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
So I always let the guest share the one thing that like really matters that they want the listener to walk away from this episode with. So for those listening, what's the one thing you want them to remember from this episode?
I think that from this episode, I really think that when you focus on the needs of the people who are in front of you, the people that you are wanting to serve, that it's important to realize that it's okay for us to be uncomfortable and not to show up with the as the master of all the tools, and to focus on the needs that need to be met in that space. And especially in this time where our social fabric is really, fragmented and there's such a need for belonging. People need to be validated that their existence matters and that their story is has value amidst the cacophony that is in this world. So sometimes that might mean less time for music making for a moment so that you can see that humanity. But ultimately, I think it makes much better music and more importantly, better humans.
I love it. Well, I'm so excited to have finally gotten a chance to hear your story and to connect with you and to make friends. I will put all sorts of fun stuff in the program notes, but thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, friends, wasn't that fun? To just like jump into a project that then ends up changing so many lives and yours. And how amazing is it that what we do for a living helps people feel like they belong and that they have a place and that they're human? Oh, I just love music and the power that it brings. I hope you know that whatever you're doing today is super important. If you're looking for more, you can always check out the Music Ed Matters podcast over on Patreon, patreon.com/Music Ed Matters. And there's little bonus episodes to keep you like energized and sparked all month long. But you, my friend, you matter so much, just like every single one of those singers in the Tacoma Refugee Choir. And music really matters, especially in its ability to bring people together. And I'll see you next time on the Music It Matters podcast.